Have you ever wondered what secrets a single photograph can hold? In the quiet archives of the Chicago Historical Society, a seemingly ordinary portrait from October 1904 hides a story of ambition, betrayal, and a chilling crime that would shake one of the city's most powerful families. The image shows two brothers, Thomas and Edward Morrison, poised in the garden of their family home, their dark suits and careful composure reflecting the pride of industrial success. Yet, upon closer inspection, something is unsettling. A subtle tension in Edward's posture, a hand clenched tightly around a small object, almost imperceptible, as if the camera itself had captured a secret he could not reveal. This was a time when Chicago was booming, when steel empires rose and fortunes were made or destroyed in the blink of an eye. But behind the polished smiles and promises of prosperity, personal rivalries and forbidden love were brewing secrets that would lead to a disappearance, a deadly confrontation, and a truth hidden for decades. In the quiet halls of the Chicago Historical Society, forensic historian Dr. Patricia Wells was leafing through a collection of early 20th century family photographs when she stumbled upon a single image that would quietly unravel one of the city's most meticulously hidden secrets. The formal portrait, dated October 15, 1904, captured two distinguished men in their 30s, posed with the deliberate elegance of prosperous businessmen of the era. The photograph's backing identified them as Thomas and Edward Morrison of Morrison Steelworks. At first glance, the image seemed the very picture of American industrial success. Thomas the elder at 35 stood confidently behind his younger brother Edward, who was 32. Both were impeccably dressed in dark wool suits, high-starched collars, and gleaming silk ties. Their posture exuded a quiet authority, the kind of silent command that earned respect within Chicago's business circles. Since its founding in the 1880s, Morrison Steelworks had been one of the city's most successful industrial enterprises, and the brothers had inherited it from their father only 2 years before this portrait was taken. Thomas was renowned for his sharp business acumen and sat on the boards of several banks, while Edward earned respect for his engineering innovations, which had modernized the family's steel production facilities. Yet, as Dr. Wells examined the photograph more closely, something subtle yet unmistakable revealed itself, transforming this image of fraternal achievement into a silent witness of a hidden crime. Edward Morrison's right hand, casually resting at his side, was not as relaxed as it seemed. It was tightly clenched around a small object, one he was clearly attempting to conceal from the camera. Barely visible, it protruded slightly between his fingers. With high-resolution digital enhancement, Dr. Wells discerned a small metallic item, perhaps a piece of jewelry or a decorative trinket, gripped with such intensity that Edward's knuckles strained even through his formal gloves. What made this discovery so compelling was the contrast between the brothers' public personas and the subtle tension revealed in Edward's concealment. Thomas appeared completely at ease, exuding confidence. Edward, however, forced a smile and held a rigid posture as if carrying an invisible burden, desperately striving to appear normal, while hiding something of vital importance. The photograph had been taken not in a studio, but in the garden of the Morrison family home, lending it an intimate domestic quality. Against this serene Victorian backdrop, Edward's anxiety became all the more pronounced. What should have been a celebratory image of familial and business prosperity now whispered of secrets far darker than anyone could imagine. To uncover the significance of Edward's hidden object, Dr. Wells immersed herself in the records of Chicago's industrial elite during the city's period of explosive growth. The brothers lived in a world of immense wealth and cutthroat competition, where fortunes could be made or destroyed by a single decision, a single scandal. Chicago in 1904 was booming, its population swelling beyond 2 million. It had become the heart of America's steel and railroad industries, a place where savvy entrepreneurs could create fortunes seemingly overnight. Success depended not only on technical skill and innovation, but on navigating the treacherous waters of labor relations politics and social influence. Morrison Steel Works had been built by their father Patrick Morrison, an Irish immigrant who transformed a small blacksmith shop into one of Chicago's premier steel suppliers. When Patrick passed away in 1902, he left the company to his sons with the expectation that they would expand the family empire and maintain their elite status. But Dr. Wells discovered that the brothers had starkly different approaches to business and life. Thomas favored the aggressive, often morally ambiguous strategies that typified Chicago's industrial titans, forming political alliances, securing lucrative government contracts, and crushing competitors. Edward, by contrast, inherited his father's traditional values and felt increasingly uneasy amid the corrupt practices sweeping through the city's industrial world. Company records revealed that Edward frequently challenged Thomas's methods, attempting to steer the company toward more ethical practices. This created growing tension between the two men, tension that now seemed almost tangible in that quiet garden photograph. The pressure was compounded by Edward's romantic involvement with Margaret O'Brien, daughter of a rival steel magnate. One could almost sense in the way Edward's hand gripped the hidden object that he was carrying a secret at the intersection of love rivalry and perhaps even deadly consequence. And so in this seemingly ordinary family portrait, history whispers a subtle warning. Sometimes the most ordinary images conceal the darkest truths, and the weight of a secret can be seen in the smallest of gestures. The relationship between Edward Morrison and Margaret O'Brien had threatened more than just the Morrison family's business empire. It had placed their social standing on a knife's edge. The O'Brien family, already notorious for scandals involving labor disputes and alleged ties to organized crime, had drawn the wary gaze of Chicago society. By 1904, whispers had begun circulating in local newspapers, hinting at tensions within Morrison Steel Works, a power struggle between the brothers that could unravel everything their father had built. Business associates later recalled that Edward had grown increasingly vocal about his desire to sell his share of the company and leave Chicago behind, seeking a life far from the industrial corruption he found distasteful. And yet, as Dr. Wells dug deeper into the Morrison family's dynamics, another far darker thread began to emerge. Margaret O'Brien had vanished mysteriously just 3 weeks before the brothers' October 1904 portrait was taken. The timing was unsettling. Edward's tense grip on that small hidden object now took on a grim significance. Margaret O'Brien had been a prominent figure in Chicago society, despite her family's controversial reputation. At 28, she was renowned for her beauty, intelligence, and independence, qualities that had drawn Edward toward her in defiance of his brother's objections. The couple had plans to marry in late 1904, with Edward intending to use his share of the steelworks profits to start a new, far from the morally murky world of Chicago industry, but Margaret never reached that future. On September 25, 1904, she disappeared from the O'Brien family mansion on Lakeshore Drive. Her personal belongings remained untouched. Her social engagements went unfulfilled. Friends and family were left bewildered with no clue to suggest she had intended to leave the city. The Chicago Police Department's investigation was limited, hampered by the O'Brien family's unwillingness to cooperate and by the prevailing belief that she had eloped with a secret lover. In a society that guarded the private lives of the wealthy, even an independent-minded young woman's disappearance could seem plausible. Yet Edward Morrison's behavior after her disappearance was impossible to ignore. He became withdrawn and anxious, cancelling meetings, appearing distracted during negotiations. His earlier enthusiasm for ethical reform at the company replaced by a quiet preoccupation with matters he would not discuss. More tellingly, he began making arrangements to liquidate his stake in Morrison Steelworks, consulting lawyers about selling his shares to Thomas and converting his personal assets into cash and easily portable investments. These actions hinted at a sudden, urgent plan to leave Chicago, a departure driven by more than mere business disagreements. And then there was the photograph. The October portrait in which Edward's clenched hand, so subtly yet unmistakably held, something now spoke volumes when analyzed with modern digital enhancement techniques, tools far beyond the reach of investigators in 1904. Dr. Wells discovered that Edward had been gripping a small piece of jewelry, a gold locket intricately designed with a Celtic knot. This was no ordinary trinket. It matched the descriptions of a family heirloom that Margaret O'Brien had worn, constantly a gift from her grandmother treasured above all else. The thought that she could have parted with it voluntarily seemed impossible. Dr. Patricia Martinez, a specialist in historical jewelry analysis, confirmed what the enhanced images suggested. The locket in Edward's hand was unmistakably Margaret's own. Its intricate knots, its delicate craftsmanship, and its familiar size and shape all matched descriptions found in society pages and police reports from the time of her disappearance. In that single gesture, Edward's white-knuckled grip on the locket, the story whispered its darkest secret. The fate of Margaret O'Brien and the role Edward Morrison may have played in it was hidden in plain sight, captured forever in a photograph meant to celebrate family and success. The locket itself whispered secrets that could not be ignored. Its distinctive Celtic craftsmanship and delicate design made its identification all but certain. That Edward Morrison possessed Margaret O'Brien's most treasured possession 3 weeks after she had vanished was damning. It suggested with a chilling clarity that she had not left Chicago voluntarily. Margaret would never have abandoned such a meaningful family heirloom. Yet, there was something even more disturbing about the locket as revealed in the enhanced photographs. Its chain appeared broken and faint. Dark stains marred the gold surface stains that could very well have been blood. The state of the jewelry implied that it had been removed from Margaret by force rather than given willingly. And the psychological weight of Edward hiding it in his hand during the portrait session was equally revealing. He had not disposed of the incriminating evidence. Instead, he had chosen to clutch it as if maintaining a silent connection to the act itself, a trophy perhaps of a crime he could neither forget nor release. The intensity of his grip combined with the obvious anxiety etched across his features suggested a man tormented by guilt and fear, yet unable to relinquish what he had taken. A photograph meant to immortalize family pride and industrial triumph instead captured Edward at the apex of psychological tension, desperately hiding proof of murder while posing for the world. Dr. Wells's meticulous examination suggested that Margaret O'Brien's disappearance was the tragic outcome of a violent confrontation with Edward Morrison, likely triggered by her threats to expose some aspect of his personal or business conduct. The unfolding of events reconstructed from police files and contemporaneous reports painted a harrowing picture domestic strife that escalated to fatal violence. In the weeks before her disappearance, Margaret had been increasingly vocal about her concerns regarding Morrison Steelworks. She had attended social gatherings where she criticized the company's labor policies and publicly questioned the ethics of Thomas Morrison's political connections. Her moral forthrightness had created tension not only with Thomas, but with Edward, as well caught between loyalty to his fiancée and obligations to his brother. Friends recalled heated arguments about the future of Edward and Margaret's relationship, and whether Edward could separate himself from the morally dubious business practices of his family. The final confrontation had apparently occurred on the evening of September 25th, 1904, at Margaret's family mansion. Servants later testified that Edward had visited that night and that raised voices were heard from the library, where the couple had met privately. Though the arguments were loud, the servants were not alarmed, accustomed to the tensions between them. Dr. Wells's analysis of preserved crime scene evidence suggested that Margaret had been killed during this confrontation. Perhaps when she threatened to end the engagement and reveal damaging information about Morrison Steelworks. Information that could have destroyed both brothers' reputations and empires. The locket torn from her neck indicated strangulation as the likely method of murder. Strangulation in domestic homicides was practical, it left few traces, required no weapons, and could be executed in the heat of conflict. The locket may have been torn off either intentionally during the act or accidentally, as Margaret struggled. Edward's choice to keep the jewelry rather than destroy it suggested impulsiveness rather than premeditation. A careful, calculated murderer would have removed all traces. But Edward's actions were frantic, reactive, a man trying to navigate an impossible situation. And yet, he still had to maintain the facade of normalcy. The October portrait, taken just weeks after the crime, captured that struggle perfectly, his composed exterior belying the storm of guilt and fear within. Edward Morrison's ability to cover up Margaret O'Brien's murder revealed the dark advantages afforded by wealth and social status in early 20th century America. Within hours of her death, he had implemented a strategy to remove her body and create the illusion that she had departed the city of her own volition. The O'Brien family's reluctance to involve police, combined with Margaret's independent reputation, provided him with perfect cover. The first step in his grim plan had been to transport Margaret's body from her family home to a remote industrial site along the Chicago River, part of the sprawling network of Morrison Steelworks warehouses and processing facilities. The company's control over these spaces, coupled with tight security, offered numerous locations where a body could be hidden from prying eyes, allowing Edward to manipulate the crime scene and shield himself from suspicion. The method Edward chose to dispose of Margaret's body was both practical and, for 1904, investigators virtually undetectable. It is believed that her body was dissolved in one of the industrial acid baths used in steel processing, a method that left no trace completely invisible to contemporary forensic science. To explain her disappearance, Edward wove an elaborate tale she had eloped with a mysterious lover, fleeing to Europe to escape scandal. Several of Margaret's personal belongings were planted at the train station, along with a forged note implying she was leaving Chicago because her family disapproved of her romantic choices. Edward's performance was meticulous. He publicly displayed grief, consulted private detectives, offered rewards for information, and maintained the persona of a desperate fiancé searching for his missing beloved. Yet, the locket remained. Its presence was a silent testament to the psychological grip the crime had on him. Despite eliminating all other evidence, Edward could not part with that small, precious object. The October 1904 portrait in which he clenched it in his hand captured him at the apex of stress, the perfect masquerade of normalcy, covering a storm of guilt and fear. Dr. Wells' research revealed that Thomas Morrison Edwards' elder brother had gradually grown aware of his sibling's crime. Suspicious behaviors, inconsistencies, and the sudden desire to sell his shares of the company had raised alarms. The decisive moment came when Thomas discovered the locket hidden in Edward's private office at the steelworks. Confronted with undeniable proof of his brother's guilt, Thomas faced a harrowing choice: uphold family loyalty or confront moral responsibility. Instead of turning Edward over to the authorities, Thomas made a darker choice. He protected his brother while using the knowledge of the murder to gain absolute control over Morrison Steelworks and to dictate Edward's future actions. This fraternal blackmail bound the brothers together in a relationship defined by guilt, fear, and mutual dependence. From that moment on, the tension visible in the October portrait made sense. Edward lived under the constant threat of exposure, while Thomas had become an accessory to murder equally vulnerable to legal repercussions. The brothers' new dynamic transformed them. What had once been a partnership marked by differing business philosophies became a criminal conspiracy held together by shared culpability. Edward's plans to leave Chicago and start anew were nullified by Thomas's leverage, forcing him to remain in the city and continue the family business under terms dictated by his elder brother. The portrait captured the psychological strain Edward's clenched hand, the forced composure, the anxiety barely restrained beneath the surface. Months passed, and the pressures of maintaining the secret began to erode both men. Edward's guilt manifested as erratic behavior, missed meetings, inappropriate comments in public, social withdrawal, and increasing dependence on alcohol. Compulsively, he began making veiled references to Margaret's death, hinting at details only someone present could know. Thomas recognized the danger of his brother's unraveling mind and implemented strict controls monitoring social contacts, controlling alcohol access, and threatening exposure if Edward spoke carelessly. Yet, these measures only drew attention. Observers in Chicago society noticed the unusual tension between the brothers and Thomas's dominance over Edward's personal and professional life. At the same time, renewed inquiries into Margaret's disappearance, particularly by her family's private investigators, added pressure. Questions about her relationship with Edward and his conduct after her disappearance forced the brothers to maintain an increasingly fragile deception. The psychological strain weighed heavily on both men. Edward's deteriorating state made exposure increasingly likely, while Thomas struggled to manage his brother's instability and protect their shared secret. Wealth, social standing, and influence offered some cover, but the human mind's fragility proved far more potent than privilege. Finally, in March 1905, Edward's mental collapse made concealment impossible. The truth long buried beneath lies, deception, and calculated manipulation emerged, demonstrating a somber lesson. Guilt and fear, even when cloaked by wealth and status, often exert a power far greater than any social advantage. In the end, it was not the authorities or public scrutiny that revealed the crime, but the inexorable weight of conscience, proving that even in the gilded corridors of early 20th century Chicago justice could not be fully silenced. The final unraveling had been triggered by a chance encounter. Edward Morrison met Margaret's younger sister, Catherine O'Brien, at a social gathering in Chicago. Her resemblance to her missing sister struck Edward like a sudden, unbearable shock. In that moment, his carefully maintained composure crumbled. Witnesses would later recall a public breakdown. Edward approached Catherine, apologizing in desperate, trembling tones for what he had done to Margaret, speaking with unnerving specificity about the final moments of her life, details that only someone present could know. The incident sent ripples through Chicago society and immediately drew the attention of law enforcement. Under intense questioning, Edward confessed. He admitted to killing Margaret during an argument about their relationship and her threats to expose the Morrison Steelworks' questionable business dealings. He revealed the method of her murder, how he disposed of her body, and even Thomas's role in concealing the crime. The revelations destroyed both brothers' lives and reputations, a grim reminder that even the most elaborate cover-ups are vulnerable to the weight of guilt and human conscience. Edward Morrison was charged with first-degree murder. Thomas, his elder brother, faced charges as an accessory after the fact. The trial gripped the city, exposing not only a horrific murder but also the corruption and moral failings of Chicago's industrial elite. Crucial to the prosecution's case was the October 1904 photograph enhanced through modern techniques, showing Edward desperately hiding Margaret's locket, a piece of evidence that sealed his guilt. Edward was convicted and sentenced to death, though this was later commuted to life imprisonment due to questions about his mental state at the time of the crime. Thomas Morrison was sentenced to 15 years for his role in concealing the murder, effectively ending his business career and social influence. Morrison Steelworks. The empire Patrick Morrison had built from humble beginnings was dissolved. Its assets were liquidated to cover legal costs and provide compensation to Margaret's family. The industrial empire, once a symbol of American ambition and success, had been undone by one son's crime, serving as a cautionary tale about the moral cost of unchecked ambition. Yet, amidst the destruction, the October 1904 portrait endured. It remains a haunting testament to the truth photographs can preserve, capturing Edward at the precise moment he concealed evidence of murder while attempting to appear normal. Dr. Wells's discovery transformed the image from a simple family portrait into one of the most significant pieces of criminal evidence in American legal history. The enhanced photograph showing Edward clenching Margaret's locket is now used in law enforcement training to illustrate the power of careful evidence analysis and the psychological insights that can be gleaned from criminal behavior. The case also underscored the duality of wealth. While it could shield wrongdoers, it could not withstand the relentless force of guilt and conscience. Through decades of historical research, forensic photography, and psychological study, Margaret O'Brien's murder was finally solved. Her family's long quest for answers was vindicated. The photograph itself, preserved at the Chicago Historical Society, stands as a chilling reminder of the truth's persistence. It shows that even the most carefully concealed crimes leave traces, and that justice, though delayed, can ultimately prevail. The Morrison brothers' story also left a lasting impact on law enforcement practices, emphasizing the importance of meticulous record-keeping, evidence preservation, and the application of emerging forensic techniques to historical mysteries. Today, the portrait reminds us that the most dangerous criminals often wear the mask of respectability, and that a single photograph, when examined with care, can reveal stories that even time cannot erase. Edward Morrison's desperate attempt to hide Margaret's locket, a gesture so subtle it might have been overlooked, ultimately became the key to unlocking one of Chicago's most shocking crimes. What was meant to celebrate business triumph instead recorded the psychological unraveling of a murderer and ensured that Margaret O'Brien would not be forgotten. It is a haunting testament to the idea that no matter how perfectly a crime is concealed, the truth has a way of emerging sometimes, a century later, whispering its secrets to those patient enough to listen.